I used to think silence meant things were under control, that if I stayed steady, so would everything else. The folder in my hand still held the notes I'd revised at midnight, margin-lined highlighted corners, smoothed flat. I'd printed an extra copy for James like always. The smell of toner hadn't faded yet. She arrived before I heard her heels. One moment I was aligning pages, the next her voice. You stayed seated when I passed, in front of board members. Her tone wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Something about the way her breath clipped the air like it had already decided what mattered and what didn't. I didn't look up at first. That seemed to bother her more. You made me look small. The door hadn't even shut behind her. I held the folder a little tighter, but my voice didn't come. You're finished here, she said. James will handle the paperwork. There was a pause like the kind that follows the snap of something expensive. I met her eyes for a moment, not in defiance, just to see if she might flinch. She didn't. When she left, James came in through the other door. He didn't sit. He ran a hand over his tie like it had misbehaved. She feels humiliated. I have to support her on this. Not a question. Not a conversation. I know it's not fair. I just can't afford for this to follow us home. The coffee ring on my desk hadn't been wiped since last week. It hadn't moved, but suddenly it felt permanent. Like proof. You're letting her rewrite what happened, I said. He didn't answer that. He only nodded toward the door. I'll make sure the severance is generous. 3 years, 47 clients, 2 Christmases missed, a Mandarin deal closed from a hospital hallway. But what they remembered, what mattered, was that I didn't stand. I slid the folder into my bag, left the extra copy on the desk. When the door clicked shut behind me, it didn't echo. It just stayed closed. Some endings don't announce themselves. They just stop letting you in. I used to think the trick was to take up less space. I stayed late most evenings, not because anyone asked, but because the reports ran smoother when I finished them alone. The lights would hum. My fingers moved on autopilot. No one ever thanked me for the formatting. I learned early that stillness made people comfortable. I wore neutral colors, nothing too sharp or tight. The cardigan I kept draped on my chair had frayed cuffs. No one ever noticed. That was the point. You didn't join the drinks last Friday. That was Cynthia once at the coffee machine. I figured you'd rather work than be remembered. I had. And she wasn't wrong. When I started tutoring Mandarin, I didn't use my full name. I tied my hair differently. Added glasses left off the badge. The service entrance was quieter anyway. You're just here to get me fluent, she reminded me after each session. Don't overcomplicate it. That was Eva before I knew her other name. She didn't look up from her phone when she said it. One day, she pointed to my laptop and said, You're weirdly organized. You should work for a firm. I smiled without explaining. The logo of that very firm was etched on the back of the screen under a thin layer of matte tape. She liked her handouts color-coded and phonetically spelled. Bring coffee next time and use the side entrance. The doorman doesn't need to see tutors. I kept showing up. Not for her. For the extra cash. For the student loan payments. For the quiet discipline of earning. There was a moment brief when I thought she saw more than my utility. You're surprisingly sharp for someone freelance, she said once. Makes you wonder what you're wasting it on. I printed her final pitch on heavy stock, the kind with a faint linen texture. She'd told me it made her feel important to hold something that didn't bend. I used my own paper, my own printer, my own time. The folder's still on my desk. Her initials, not mine, on the cover. Maybe that's what I got wrong. I thought hiding made things safer, but some people don't want quiet. They want disappearance. I've learned that being erased doesn't always feel violent. Sometimes it's just a blank space where your name used to be. The quarterly strategy meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I didn't receive the invite. Cynthia mentioned a glitch in the system, told me not to take it personally. "These calendar tools aren't perfect," she said, already halfway through her coffee. Daniel Brooks presented slides I'd built. My name wasn't in the footer. A week later, the executive newsletter went out. Outstanding execution on the Marlow expansion. Kudos to Daniel for his exceptional foresight. There was a chart I had redrawn 3 times, color matching the data to client expectations. I remember because I used my own software after the office tool crashed. At last year's gala, I'd worn a dress my mother used to call interview safe. Black collarbone, high. Forgettable. I was seated near the waitstaff entrance. Midway through the evening, I overheard someone ask who had managed the regional merger. "She's in finance, I think. Quiet one. Sharp with spreadsheets. They didn't mean me, not exactly, but it landed anyway." This year, the room shimmered. Eva stood at the head of the largest table, one hand lifted mid-phrase speaking Mandarin, with exact pauses. I recognized. Zai Jian. She pronounced carefully, the tone slightly stiff. Laughter followed. Someone clapped. Fluent. Already. She picks things up fast. I could still see the practice sheet in my mind, typed in bold double-spaced with underlined syllables and simplified side notes. She liked to call them training wheels, though she never said thank you. When Brian called my name, I turned reflexively, just enough for her eyes to meet mine. No smile, no words, just a narrowing. The way someone looks at a face they've seen on a different day in a different role and can't quite place. She walked past, a half step slower but never stopped. I'd left a scarf at her place. Grey wool a snag near one edge. I'd set it on the back of the chair once after an early session. It was still there when I packed up the final script. She never mentioned it. I never asked. Some things stay behind because they were never really noticed to begin with. I didn't expect anything when I sent the email. No explanation, no anger. Just the videos clipped clean showing exactly what happened. Her voice filled the screen, slow, Andret repeating the same sentence 3 times before getting through it. She had once leaned back in the chair and told me she had a natural ear for languages, that her brain just picked things up differently. I had nodded without answering. She liked to speak in superlatives, always best, always brilliant. What she hated most was being corrected. In one of the videos, she laughed after misusing a word that changed the meaning entirely. She didn't notice. I had written her script phonetically, even the business terms she insisted she already knew. Every line, every pause, every fallback phrase mine. When James opened the files, he didn't say anything, just pressed play, then leaned forward as if the distance might soften what he was seeing. The last clip ended with her asking me to write something out, like a children's song, slow-spaced, repeatable. She doesn't understand what she's saying. That was all I said. He looked at me fully, then like he was trying to recognize someone in a crowd. "You're the one who trained her." I didn't respond. I took off my glasses instead, let my hair fall the way she'd always seen it. His silence confirmed what I already knew. She called me later. Her voice was low, measured. "You've violated everything." I waited. "You think sending those videos makes you right?" A pause. You've destroyed any credibility you had left." She hung up before I could answer. The file was still open on my desktop. I didn't close it. The name hadn't changed, Eva Script Final Doc, the same version I'd printed on thick ivory paper because she said thinner pages made her feel small. There's something hollow about watching someone wear your work like it was theirs to begin with. But hollowness is not the same as silence. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't forward the videos again. I didn't warn her about the investors. She hadn't wanted help. She wanted a mask that didn't slip. I left the file untouched. The proof was already there. Some illusions aren't destroyed. They dissolve when no one volunteers to hold them up. I used to think the last word mattered, but not all endings come with sound. The desk drawer stuck slightly when I pulled it open. I didn't force it. Inside there was only the fountain pen. Black lacquer. Silver clip. The kind my father said was for people who signed things that mattered. It hadn't been used in months. The company switched to digital approvals a year ago. James stood near the door but didn't speak. He'd offered options. Transition titles. A quiet shift in responsibility. A rewritten narrative that would keep everything tidy. This doesn't need to be final. I looked at the paper on his desk. It had my name in bold, centered above the words, "Voluntary Resignation." It's unfortunate, he continued, but these situations only spiral when people cling to blame. He gestured toward the pen. "You built a strong department. You'll land well. Don't make this about principle." I didn't pick up the pen. I took the one from my drawer instead. When I left the room, Amanda was by the elevator. She held something that looked like a courier envelope, but didn't extend it. Her lips parted slightly, as if starting a sentence she didn't finish. "You always seemed useful." That was all she managed. I nodded once. Not at agreement, just acknowledgement. The elevator doors opened. I didn't turn around. The box I carried had nothing with logos. No plaques, no lanyards. A mug with a chipped rim. 3 notepads with no letterhead. And the pen. At home, I hung the blazer in the back of the closet. The fabric had worn soft at the elbows. There was a thread loose at the cuff, the kind you only notice when standing still. The last message from Evangeline had already faded to the bottom of my phone. No subject line. No goodbye. I didn't forward anything. No farewell email. No update to LinkedIn. There's a kind of clarity in leaving without rephrasing the story. I didn't take a final look at the building. I didn't check if anyone was watching from the windows above. The elevator had closed quietly the same way it had always opened. Some places don't throw you out. They just let the door seal behind you and expect you to wait for a reason to return. I didn't wait. I didn't leave anything behind worth reclaiming. Leaving without a sound doesn't mean I wasn't there. It means I no longer need to prove I ever was. I used to measure value by how fast I replied to things. Deadlines, pings, blinking dots in message threads. I don't check for dots anymore. The freelance work comes slowly in polite emails with short deadlines. Most clients don't ask for video calls, just delivery. I prefer that. I translate small things, product descriptions, corporate blurbs, apology letters meant to sound human. No one's name is on them but mine, and even that's at the bottom of an invoice. I made tea this morning in the chipped cup I found at a yard sale 5 years ago. Someone else had already glued it once. The crack runs along the base in a crescent shape. I always drink with the seam turned toward me, like it's part of the ritual. It doesn't leak. My closet is smaller now. I pressed the blazer and folded it into a sealed bag, not to preserve it, but to let it rest. I reach more often for a worn cotton sweater that smells like the inside of old books. The sleeves hang longer than they should. I don't hem them. You always had such narrow shoulders, my mother said once. Nothing ever fit you properly. She mailed me a catalogue one Christmas, circled a coat she thought would make me look like someone. I never ordered it. The bookshelf finally has space. I stacked old translations I used to shelve behind reference manuals. Some of them are clumsy, too literal, too careful, but they're mine. I marked a few pages with red tabs, mostly out of habit. I sleep with the window cracked now. There's a whistle in the frame when the wind hits from the east. It reminds me that things don't have to be sealed tight to hold. No more notifications at 2 a.m. No more draft subject lines that start with "just checking in." The silence stretches long enough now that I can tell when it's mine. The tea cools quickly in this apartment. I reheat it less. Some things are meant to be finished before they fade. I haven't spoken her name aloud since I left. I think names lose shape when they're no longer said with need. The mug sits beside me, warm where the crack used to be sharp. I don't look at it when I drink. I don't need to. Some repairs aren't meant to disappear. They just hold quietly. Enough. I've noticed people only say "please" when something's at risk. The call came in the middle of a sentence I was translating, something about customs paperwork and shipping delays. I let it ring twice. When I picked up, I didn't speak. He started anyway. "It's not about Evangeline," he said. "It's the investors. They're here. Early." I waited. "She's struggling." They asked about the compliance structure in Mandarin and she froze. She left the room, locked herself in the restroom. Another pause. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. He didn't say her name again. Only numbers. Team members. The weight of the international division. You could walk in as a consultant. One time. Temporary title. No strings. He offered a salary. Then a bump. Then equity. "I know you're not doing this for her. I'm asking because what you built is collapsing." I didn't say yes. But I showed up. I took the stairs 12 flights. It gave me time to breathe without permission. The side entrance still stuck slightly when pulled. Amanda looked up from the reception desk, then down again. No greeting. That felt right. No one offered me a badge. Inside the conference room, she was seated at the end of the table, back straight, eyes forward. The neckline of her blouse dipped lower than usual. A distraction, maybe. I didn't sit near her. Mr. Bennet nodded in my direction. "Ah, you must be assisting." I replied in Mandarin. His posture changed. So did the room. She didn't look at me, not once. James leaned forward. "She's just here to help clarify a few things." I corrected him. "I'm here to make sure the deal doesn't fall apart." One of the partners asked for clarification on logistics infrastructure. She opened her mouth, then stopped, looked at her water glass. Nothing came out. I answered, slowly, precisely. I didn't look toward her when I spoke. Mr. Bennet gave a small nod, much clearer. James offered a tight smile. Evangeline touched her earring and adjusted her seat. Still silent. As the meeting wrapped, someone muttered near the coffee tray, thought she was the expert. Another voice replied, "She's the reason we're still in the room. Nobody used her name." That evening, I received a follow-up text from James. "Thank you. You saved us." I didn't reply. They hadn't called because I mattered. They called because I remembered what they tried to forget. I used to rehearse my silence before meetings, as if shrinking made space for the right people to speak. During the Q&A, they looked at me, not out of politeness direction. I responded in Mandarin, paced and clean. No filler, no hedging. I watched them shift their weight forward, nod slightly, take notes when I named specifics they hadn't brought up yet. She didn't move, her nameplate tilted slightly against the tablecloth. No one corrected it. One investor tapped his pen slowly during her pauses. No one asked for her opinion. Margaret Sloane waited near the door. Her coat was folded over one arm. If you were the liaison, moving forward, she said, we'd be open to revisiting the conversation. I didn't reply. She nodded once, as if that was answer enough. Back home, I reheated leftovers in the same pan I'd used all week. I opened my laptop and read through an email twice before responding. The firm in Seattle had a modest budget, a clear timeline, and a direct tone. They wanted someone to guide a market pivot toward mid-sized Chinese suppliers. We're looking for clarity, not gloss. I typed yes. In another tab, the adult language course site confirmed my registration. 4 students so far. No bios, just usernames and time zones. I wrote the first module with no examples pulled from luxury brands, no fabricated case studies, just grammar rhythm usage. I didn't add a headshot. I ironed the blue shirt with the soft collar. The label inside had long since faded. The cuffs didn't align perfectly anymore. I wore it anyway. I buttoned it all the way up. You always pick the most forgettable things, my sister once said at Thanksgiving, folding her napkin with unnecessary precision. No one remembers what you're wearing. That's your problem. I didn't respond then either, but I'd kept the shirt. I adjusted the small lamp on the desk until the light hit just right. Not dramatic, just clear. Nothing in the room was staged. I didn't open the message from James. The subject line began with appreciation. The scarf I used now was plain wool navy, unbranded. I'd bought it on a sidewalk rack for $5 and never told anyone. No one asked. I don't measure value the way I used to. I used to believe being chosen meant something. That recognition came from reflection. It doesn't. It comes from positioning. I don't position anymore. I don't need to be seen the way they expect. I only need to fit within the shape I no longer apologize for. I no longer wait for things to be fair before I move forward. The meeting took place in a neutral room. No portraits, no windows. The table was long but not imposing. Someone had left a folder at my seat, typed, formatted, signed. We'd like to offer you the role permanently. Vice President of International Strategy. There was water in a glass tumbler, the kind with thick edges that don't pretend to be delicate. James sat 2 chairs away, sleeves cuffed tie slightly loosened. I would be honored to work under your leadership, he said. If you'll have us. I didn't smile. I nodded once slowly. I have conditions. They waited. No member of an executive's family may participate in personnel decisions. One of them reached for a pen. I will build my own team. No approvals needed outside compliance. Another page flipped, and I want the previous termination documented as wrongful, attached to my internal file. The room didn't argue. After the meeting, I walked past the hallway I once used to wait in invisible until needed. The light fixtures had been replaced. I didn't pause. At home, I opened a browser and drafted a message to Elite Academic Services. Please cancel all remaining sessions for client Evangeline Whitmore. I will not be accepting further bookings. No punctuation beyond the period. I didn't delete her number. I didn't block her. I had no more use for either action. The envelope I'd kept in my drawer was still there, heavy paper, unmarked. I slid the last of the name tags inside. Each one had been carefully printed Eva E. Whitmore, Executive Mandarin Track. I peeled them off slowly. The adhesive left faint traces. I sealed the envelope. No address. The ring I used to wear, when tutoring thin smooth meant to signal nothing, had a dull line across its band. It had caught once on her glass table, left a sound I never forgot. I placed it on the shelf beside the ceramic dish where I keep coins and receipts. I always thought that ring looked cheap, my sister had said, once lifting it with 2 fingers. You wear things like you're hiding. I hadn't answered. Now I don't hide. I choose. Some closures don't require doors or statements or applause. I no longer measure the day by what needs answering. The kettle gives off its faint sigh when it finishes. The mug I use now is one I found on a back shelf at a thrift shop, unmatched matte, slightly crooked at the lip. It doesn't sit flush on the table. I let it wobble. I place it beside the folder I stitched together last week. No company seal. Just blue ink and graph paper. The cover reads, "Proposal underlined once." Inside outlines not projections, goals not headlines. I've circled a few phrases in pencil. The eraser left soft dust across the margin. I brushed it away and didn't rewrite. A notification light blinks. I let it go. The subject line says, "Formal vote passed. Appointment confirmed." I already know what it says. That kind of certainty doesn't press. The silver pen sits beside the frame now. The one with the photograph of my parents in front of the library steps him in his corduroy blazer, her with wind-swept hair and a folder clutched tight to her side. I remember the way he used to pause before signing anything, like names were promises instead of labels. The window is cracked, just slightly. I hear the soft drag of leaves below. I don't check the temperature. I stopped dressing for air-conditioned rooms a long time ago. The scarf over the back of the chair is plain wool worn at the edge. I've meant to mend it. I haven't. It still works. A small card flutters near the edge of the desk. Handwritten, uneven script. Thank you, Ms. Reese. I think I found my voice. I didn't hang it up. I just leave it where it lands. There's a quiet now that doesn't feel like lack. It's not empty. Just still. I don't explain where I've been when people ask what I do. I give them the simple version. Some nod. Some don't. You always made things sound heavier than they needed to be, my aunt once said, wiping a spoon too precisely. You never knew how to just let things go. Maybe she was right, but maybe not everything is meant to be light. I don't chase clarity anymore. I let it sit down next to me. The mug warms my hand. The ink dries slow on the last page. There's no signature yet, just space for it. I don't need applause. I don't need correction. I don't need to be summoned. I just need the chair beneath me, the breath in my chest, the paper in my hand. In the end, I don't need to rise to be recognized. I only need to remain unchanged, unhidden, unmoved.